In this video, we will substitute the literal data that adds a customer to the database with data from the ActiveData file customer.csv, which contains 10 customer records. Here we have the Add Account visual test in the Visual Navigator. Click Create Repetition Type Logic on the Silk Test Workbench toolbar. Click Next, and from the Select a Logic Type page, click Repeating a sequence of steps using data from an ActiveData file. Click Next. Since only one ActiveData asset has been associated with the visual test, it already appears in the ActiveData asset list. In the Start Row text box, leave the default value at 1. The first row of the ActiveData file will be used when the repetition logic executes. Check the End at Last Row Containing Data checkbox. The repeat will continue using each row until the last row is used. Click Get All Rows in Sequence. For each repetition, a different row of customer data from the ActiveData file will be used as input. We've now defined how the data file will be used in the repetition logic and how many repetitions will occur, which means we're ready to determine the steps in the visual test that will be repeated. In the Build the Repeat page, click the Do Step link. The Select Step dialog box opens. Select the step that begins interaction with the InsureCo website. This is the step immediately after the Start step. Click OK. The Select Steps dialog box closes and the text for the selected step appears in the Do Step link. Click the To Step link and select the step that ends interaction with the InsureCo website. This goes immediately before the End step. Click OK. Click Next. The summary page of the Test Logic Designer opens, displaying the test logic you've defined. Click Finish to insert the test logic into the test steps of your visual test. In the visual test, Silk Test Workbench inserts a step after the Start step that starts the repetition logic. Workbench also inserts a step before the End step that ends the repetition logic. The step text should be End Repeat. All steps between the newly inserted repetition logic steps now appear as indented steps nested between the repetition logic steps. The final part of using ActiveData in the visual test is to map the data in the ActiveData file to the literal data in the visual test. Before a visual test can use data in an ActiveData file, data in the applicable test steps must be mapped to use data in columns of an ActiveData file. Select the first step in the visual test that enters data into a field. This should be the step that enters Pat into the first name text box on the Create a New Account page of the InsureCo website. Properties for the step appear in the Properties pane. Click in the Value area and select ActiveData. The ActiveData Asset text box shows the ActiveData asset which was associated with the visual test. The column names from the customer's ActiveData file display in the columns list. In the columns list, select the first name column. This is the column in the file that contains first names, which you're mapping to substitute for the literal data Pat. Click OK to close the dialog box and map the data. Silk Test Workbench replaces the actual data in the test step with an expression that maps to the selected data in the ActiveData file. We'll now repeat these steps for the other test steps containing data to be substituted, including last name, email address, mailing address, city, state, postal code, and password. We've now set up the visual test to use data from an ActiveData file, and we're ready to play it back and review the results. Click Playback on the toolbar. In the result description text box, type Add Customers using ActiveData. The customer records from the ActiveData file will actually be entered into the customer database. Click OK. Silk Test Workbench plays back the enhanced test. I'll now reduce the video replay duration until the point where the 10th row of data from the ActiveData file is entered by SiltTest. On the Playback Complete dialog box, click Go to Result. The result window opens to the Summary tab. Click the Details tab to display the result of every step. The Details tab displays the result of every step executed during playback. We can now use the scroll bar to scroll through the executed steps. There are more steps in the Test Steps pane of the Result window than there are actual steps in the visual test. This is because each repetition includes its own set of executed steps.